over in the press, and when I pulled the clutch apart, the old clutch that was in the machine was an aftermarket one, and it was just toast, so we didn't continue with it. But I was lucky enough to have another clutch that I'd tucked away, and it was a genuine Fergie one, and I think it was off a probably 35X, which is similar horsepower. So I'll just wipe the oil off this plate. Oil at this stage probably doesn't matter, but we'll give it a wipe with a bit of thinners or something like that later on. But the main thing is I've got a plate in the press, and we'll just run through assembling the clutch. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is these new springs. Now, these yellow springs here, these are the originals, and it had a full complement of those, and so it probably had 12 springs. And the old springs, they were a little bit longer and lighter than the new ones. So what the story is with these, instead of having green springs, yellow springs, blue springs, whatever, they've gone to one red spring now. So you can see how the coil is far heavier, and with the coil being heavier, it's far harder to compress. And if we can move that quite easily. This one you have to put a lot more force on. So where we had 12 of these fellows, we can actually run with 6 of these red ones, and that's what they're recommending. Now, before you put any springs on, they each have a little, it's a little fibrous washer that goes under the springs. Not 100% sure what it does, but they all have it. I've never actually asked, so we'll just put them on under these springs. I'll try and match them up so they're all similar thickness. Looks like there's a couple of different sizes here, so we'll just get them ready. And probably at this stage I won't leave the springs on, as when we're doing this other work we're going to knock them on the floor. That's just how it works. If you don't drop stuff on the floor, you're not having much of a go, really, are you? Okay, now these screws here, we've got a bit of shadow happening. I'm just trying to get a bit of light going to see how things work, but no, we do need a bit of light there. Maybe if we bring the light in closer. That might help. Okay, so these screws here, they come down on the outside here. Now, this main plate here, that's your main clutch plate, and you have a PDO plate. So when you pull the fingers on, the fingers which pivot here, they pivot in the cover, and as they come down they pull this plate up, and so it releases the drive on this first plate, and then depending on when this one hits the second plate, it releases a PDO. But you have to remember to put them in at this early stage, so we don't worry about the setting or anything like that. We'll just pop a little bit of grease on the threads. A little bit of grease, not a lot of grease. And they'll screw down. Which one is it? Be one of these fellas. The nut's a little bit sticky on that one. All the birds. It's early in the morning here in Bundy Bear, Australia, and the birds are having a bit of a sing along outside. And we just want these down a bit further than they need to be at the moment. We can adjust all that up later on. Alright, so the pins, or the fingers. Now these are your finger. You have an anti-rattle spring here, and they each have a link that goes with them. Now the link's held on with a pin, and the pin goes down in through here, or this link, and the pin goes in through here. Now take note of which way this pin goes, because the clutch turns, the engine will be turning that way. The head of the pin goes towards the thrust. So for the moment, all we need to do here is take note of how those pins went. We're just going to put a blob of grease in there. And pop the pins back in. So it's just lubricating, a bit of lubrication there. That'll give us a nice easy pedal feel. And then we have we bring that follow through into there. So just spread that nice and even, and spreading it like that, we have the surface area of the top of the pin and nice even sides on the pin here, so you have a nice even wear rate. We just chop these little fellas off, and there we go. So what we do now is a little bit of grease again on the side here, on the pin, and down in through the hole, and just make sure that's lubed up. Now these on the side here, grease goes on the side here too, and that's so when we put the other plate down, there's no friction between the two surfaces. So for the moment that just sits there like that. That can't come out. When we get the top cover on, it comes down over here, and there's a plate that sits there and stops that from going like that. So I'll do the rest of these fingers, okay, and then we'll come back. All the fingers in now, and they're sitting up nicely. Now the next cab off the rank is this plate here. Now this plate here, it you can see that there's a machined finish here. It's quite a rough machined finish, and there's a chamfer in this end here, and the PDO plate goes here. The main plate goes under this other one. So you can see there's a little bit of wear here, but look, that's nothing we're going to worry about at this stage. We move those pins across, then this plate sits down there once we get it all lined up, and actually we might put just a little grease each side, and look, that just helps the plate go up and down a little bit easier. Make sure these pins are right in the centre, not sticking out. Oh, another thing to look for, which I haven't mentioned, is when you pull a clutch apart, centre punch it. So you can't see that, I don't think. Just here, there's a couple of little white dots. There, you can just see them there. When you pull the clutch apart, we usually centre punch the items so they can all go back next to each other, so they can go back together. And there's the marks. There's the marks on this one, so we'll bring this one down so the marks line up to where it used to run, and that sits there. So we've got a little movement here, but you want that fairly firm. You can braze the side here and build them up a little bit if you feel you need to, but no, look, some people do, some don't. It depends what your preference is. Now, on this surface here, this is where the PDO plate sits. So we'll go and get the PDO plate. I'll give this a little wipe over with a thinner's rag so there's no oily residue. And this is in good condition. You'll notice all this clutch, I actually bead blasted it and sand blasted it. It was getting a bit rusty. It was just an old clutch I took out of something one time, and it may even been a leftover one from a customer job or a tractor I restored years ago, but it was better than what I had available, so I thought, well, I could have bought an aftermarket one and put on, but where's the fun in that? So I'll go and tidy this up, and look, it's just a matter of giving it a wipe and we'll put the plate in. Right, I've wiped that over with the thinner's rag. Now this is your PDO clutch plate, and it's 10 spline I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you'll notice one side there's just rivets and the other side there's a boss, and I couldn't remember which way that went, so I've just gone and looked at the genuine Massey manual, and you can actually see that boss sitting up at the top there. So at this stage we just pop that in there, and you can see these screws here. When this clutch plate comes, when this one comes up, it pushes this other plate away from there. So at this stage I just like to make sure that those screws are below that surface. That one doesn't feel quite right to me. That's one of the correct screws there. So we'll take this lock nut off here. I've just closed the back door of the shed over. On the sound, I'm hearing a lot of road noise coming. It's early in the morning and we just have a breeze, and everyone heading into town to do a bit of shopping or whatever they're doing Saturday morning. The road noise is coming through clear this morning, so hopefully we can block it all out a little bit for you. And if we can't, well, that's just what happens in the big smoke, eh? So we'll just run them down a little bit. Don't be too worried where they are at the moment, it's not important. Now the next plate going on, that's this fella here. And once again it's all sandblasted up, and it sits down, and you'll see those tags there, they line up with these PDO adjustment screws here. So we can see that we have a bit of clearance there. When we move the plate, these move, so that's fine. But look, don't get too hung up on all that at this stage. Now this spring, that's a Belleville spring, sits up this way, and I think what I've forgotten to do is look for centre punch marks, if there was any. No, there wasn't any on that, so that's okay. Now this spring goes here, and on the top cover you can see a bit of a lip, and this spring locates in that lip there. So how you put this on's up to you entirely. There's my dots, so we have to feed all the fingers through before we put this piece on. Put that up through there. Make sure all the anti-rattle springs are sitting where they need to be. It has to sit there, that sits there. We have to make sure that we're sitting nice and true. Now this bevel spring here, we have to make sure that that's sitting down where it needs to be. And we also, actually something I didn't mention, was this PDO plate down in here. We just need a little swipe of grease each side there, so that where that PDO plate sits up in the little groove here, so where that sits, it's got a little bit of lubrication, so it doesn't want to bind. A little bit more here. I should have done that earlier. You don't need much, just enough to let it slide. So when we have all of these three down in the groove here, we're looking good. That seems to be sitting good. Don't worry about the fingers there just yet. Okay, that's looking like we're good. Now, if we pop these springs in, and you may think I've done that backwards a little bit, but look, what I found is just about without fail, when I put the springs on first, then bring everything down, it all ends up on the floor. So this is just how I've worked it out. It works for me. Probably other people do it differently. Okay, so what we have to do now, we have to put a bar across here and press all this down, so we can get the fingers in, the pins for the fingers, and there is actually transport screws that come down through here, and when we compress these springs, we can screw these dampener screws or these transport screws down in, and that'll hold the clutch with a bit of tension on it while we get it over to the flywheel, and that lets us move the plates and that around a little bit. But so look, I'll go and find the bar I had and we'll press down on here. Right, we have a pressing bar across here, and look, I didn't film the full pressing. The air presses noisy. I'll just give you a bit of a blast. But what we've done, we've lined up all the plates. You can see that the plates sitting up nice and free inside here. The bevel spring, we can actually check that we can still move that around a bit, and we can check that that's okay. Now, these little 1/4 inch transport bolts, we can just bring them in just as a bit of a safety at this stage. And if you haven't got a press, don't be discouraged from doing this job. When we used to do these clutches out in the bush, we'd go to the farmer's place, pop the clutch apart, replace what we needed to, and you can buy all of these parts separately. I'm pretty sure on Queensland Tractor Spares website I've got them all listed separately. If not, I'll have a look and I'll be working on it. And you can just have a bit of quarter UNF threaded rod, and we used to have like a little T-handle welded to it, so you could screw that down and then a nut, and you could just, once you bottomed the thread out, you could just get a spanner and bring the nut down. And that's how we did it in the bush, and it worked fine. There was no problem with it. Often, you know, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to be 60 to 100 kilometres from home doing these jobs, so you didn't pack up and run back to town all the time, you just got on with it. So a lot of our tools, I'm a bit spoilt now. I've got all the gear in my shed here. Now I've sold my workshop, but sold it all, then I had to buy it all back again. Oh, I bought new stuff though. So look, there's just a little bit of weight on those fellas there now. That's okay. We don't get too worried about where everything sits at this stage. So we can back the press off. And we have these slopping around like a cock in a sock. And everything is nice and loose and free, and do check for that. Do check it's like that. Now, these pins that go into the fingers, there's a little hole down here, and you can see the pin, this little retaining clip goes down in the hole. And how that works is this pin goes in, then that clip comes down, and it's retained on the pin there. So what we need to do at this stage is we can bring the fingers back out. We need to make sure there's a bit of lubrication on each side where the fingers would go. Whoop, a bit much. I'm a bit heavy-handed with the grease, but anyway, everyone knows that. If you watch me videos, you know that. And a little bit up the hole. So look, there's nothing too exciting about this part. You bring the pin in. You try and line that up nice and straight. And you can see if we poke that pin through a little bit, you can see we're fairly straight there. Well, can you see that? Yeah. So we bring that back, and we can see down the hole that's lined up. So you just get this little pin here, little clip. Get your little hammer like my little one here. Now see, this little tab's not where it should be. That's a good thing there. There's a little bit of movement in this housing there, but look, that's fine. Look, this clutch will certainly work. It'll work well. So we'll bring them around. There's our dots all lined up still. Make sure this little wire clips up this time. Line him up there. He needs turning just a little and bring him back in till we can see him down the top. Yep, that's not going anywhere. Actually, I might pull that out and retension that a little bit more. Oh, well, no way that's going out. I can't get it out. Bargain. Okay, lucky last. If we bring the spring over through here. The sun's coming out, the shed's starting to creak a little bit, but that's just par for the course. Par for the course in Bundy Bear's shed anyway, big tin shed. There's a little bit of wear in this cover, but look, that's fine, we're not going to worry about that. Now, these bolts, we have domed head bolts here. They go down into your fingers. These pins actually need to go up and over. The springs, I mean. And you can feel the tension on the fingers there. I should have put them up earlier. Those of you who do videos will understand. You get that much going on. Now, I've found in the past a fairly good setting for these is just 1 or 2 threads out underneath the finger here as a good starting point. But we're not going to set those as yet. We wait till the clutch is in the tractor to set all that up. The important thing with all these screws is that when they're on the tractor, and look, to tell you the truth, it really doesn't matter if you're 1 turn high or 1 turn low on the thread. You can probably adjust that out most of the time. You're probably better off having it just a thread or 2 under. I have seen worn clutches where they get worn in all these links here, and the bottom of this bolt actually tags the rivets here. So the main important thing is that they're even, so that when the throwout bearing pushes on the clutch here, it pushes evenly. You haven't got one side of the plate picking up before the other. And so obviously if one side picks up before the other, when you let your foot off the clutch, one side goes down before the other. So most of the load or the torque of your tractor is getting started to be taken up on one side of the plate. So instead of going evenly, it goes like that, and your plates wear and the outside of your plate wears and things like that. So I'll just fix these springs up while we're going here. And same here. I should have done that earlier, like I said. But if you bugger it up like I did, well, you can fix it. So that's all okay. So whenever you're doing a job like this, just turn things around a few times, have a look, make sure it's what you expect to see. That'll clamp up in the flywheel. You can see at the moment that's slopping around there, that's good, and we can move that bevel spring a little bit still, but as we clamp it up, or as we tighten up the transport screws, that'll come in good. So these transport screws I'm using, I believe, are a little long. Usually you can clamp it down a bit tighter than that, but look, that'll be fine. That's assembling the pressure plate. Now that'll probably do this video, fitting the flywheel and assembling the clutch onto the flywheel and all that, and that'll be a separate one. So there you go. That's how to assemble your laycock clutch. I think this is a 911 clutch, which means 9-inch PDO plate and 11-inch main drive plate. So, right, we'll move on to something else.